Kwabna calls this Afraid to Lose You. Time check, 5 minutes past the hour of 9. We're getting into our next conversation, and you've got full details of that on 3news.com. Alban Bagbin releases A+ Mustafa Yusuf to NIB for interrogation. We'll also have graphics up on our Facebook page so that you can follow along with the conversation. The story is as follows. Now, the Speaker of Ghana's Parliament has agreed to a request by the National Intelligence Bureau, NIB, to release two members of Parliament, Mustafa Yusuf and Kwame Asare, of being A+ for investigations. Now, the MPs have been directed to appear before NIB officials for a preliminary interaction on Monday, April 7, 2025. So that's this coming Monday at 10 a.m., and this will take place in Parliament. Now, this is contained in a letter addressed to the Director General of the National Intelligence Bureau dated April 2. And I am quoting parts of that letter. It reads as follows. Please refer to your letter dated the 25th of March, 2025, in respect of a request for the release of Mustafa Yusuf, MP for Yagaba Kubori constituency, and Kwame Asare of being A+, MP for Gomwa Central constituency. I am directed by the Right Honourable Speaker to inform you that, having regard to the limitations of Article 117 and 118 of the 1992 Constitution of the Republic, the existing protocols established with the security and intelligence agencies, and also the public interest, Parliament in principle agrees to the request in the above matter. That's part of the letter. Now, the letter signed by the Clerk to Parliament, Ebenezer Ahuma, stated that accordingly, the Right Honourable Speaker has directed the honourable members to make themselves available for the preliminary interaction with your officials in Parliament Monday, 7th April at 10 a.m. Now, it added the honourable members will be requested to have their lawyers present at the interaction. Kindly have your officials contact the Legal Services Office for assistance on arrival for the meeting. The letter was, however, silent on the reasons for the request by the NIB for these MPs in particular. Of course, we're monitoring developments. We will be expanding this conversation in due course. Now, what do we make of this, and what do we think is the source? Now, if you're watching us on Facebook, we have the graphics up on the screen. You can follow along with that conversation. What we know from sources. Now, a recent threat to expose the identity of ex-government officials allegedly involved in Ahmed Swale's murder. You may or may not have been privy to those comments made by Kwame Asare of being A+. That's what we gather could potentially be at the heart of this investigation. Now we have, or this invitation, shall I say. We also have the interception of a truck carrying suspected missing cables belonging to ECG in his constituency. If you joined us yesterday, we read that out. It was on Kwame Asare Obing's Facebook page, and he had attached, I believe, a picture to it. It forms part of that broader conversation about ECG missing containers. We also had Honorable Bedra in studio. He weighed in on that. Now, when it comes to Mustafa Yusuf, he's also invited by the NIB. What do we know from sources? Well, his mention in the National Service Authority ghost name scandal, where he once served as executive director. You know that scandal has been quite high up on the radar, at least towards the end of last year, during the elections, just before and also after it broke wide open. It's still a matter that is ongoing. Also, his involvement in controversies surrounding the budget and organization of the All-African Games under his watch as sports minister. This would have been around August, September of last year. Could this potentially be the reason, one of the reasons why he's being invited? We'll explore that. Now, let's take a look at the standing orders Order 24 of Parliament's standing orders. What does that say? Immunity from service of process and arrest. And this morning, a number of callers had brought up that particular provision. Let's read that out. If you're on Facebook, you can follow along. Now, a civil or criminal process coming from any court or place out of Parliament shall not be served on or executed in relation to the Speaker or a member or to the Clerk of Parliament while the Speaker, member or the Clerk is on the way to, attending at or returning from any proceedings in Parliament. 2. A civil or criminal process coming from any court or place out of Parliament shall not be served on or executed in relation to the Speaker or a member of or the Clerk to Parliament within the precincts of Parliament. 3. Where the House is on recess and a member, the Clerk or officer is not on the way to or attending at a proceeding of Parliament, the member, the Clerk or officer may be served a process from a court or a place out of Parliament through the Speaker. 4. Where a member, the Clerk or officer is served while on the way to or attending to proceedings of Parliament, the member, the Clerk or officer may notify the Speaker of the service and the Speaker, after ascertaining that the member, the Clerk or officer is on the way to or attending to a proceeding of Parliament, cause the process to be returned to the Registrar of the Court in accordance with Article 117 of the Constitution. Okay, immunity from service of process and arrest. Civil or criminal process coming from any court or place out of Parliament shall not be served on or executed in relation to the Speaker or a member or the Clerk to Parliament while he is on his way to, attending at or returning from any process of Parliament. And I'm looking at Article 117 of the Constitution of Ghana. Again, if you're on Facebook, you can follow along with the graphics and make sure that you never miss a beat. Time check, 12 minutes past the hour of 9. Let's get onto the phone lines now and speak with Mr. Sami Obing. He's the Executive Director, Parliamentary Network Africa. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us on the program. How are you doing this morning?
Very well, thanks for asking.
Now, we are weighing in on this particular issue, which concerns the release of some members of Parliament, A+ Mustafa Yusuf, to NIB by the Speaker of Parliament, and we're looking to put some more flesh on the bones. What do the rules say, and also what is the way forward? Before we actually get into the meat of the matter, I just want your preliminary thoughts on how the 9th Parliament is progressing. We've entered the second quarter of 2025. What are your preliminary assessments?
Well, the 9th Parliament has just concluded what we will call the first meeting of this 9th Parliament. Members of Parliament sat for a number of days and they are now on recess. Expected to be back in the House sometime in the month of May. So during this period, expected to do a number of constituency-related work. For those of them who are on committees that will be active during this recess period, committees are expected to sit and all of that. So that's the status of Parliament. But yes, it's been a very interesting start to the 9th Parliament. Of course, there's been some lows, which certainly I hope that they would correct them once they are back, including issues around attendance, including the very nasty things that happened during the vetting of ministers. But I think the posts are quite enormous. There's a lot of work that has been done during this first meeting of the 9th Parliament, considering that the government of the day appears to be in a hurry, because it needed to get the full complement of its ministers. It needed to get its budget. It needed to get some laws repealed, some laws passed, and what have you, and all these things had to go before Parliament. And I think Parliament has discharged itself creditably by ensuring that these volumes of business went through Parliament before they went on recess. So it's a fair start, and we look forward to how the subsequent meetings of Parliament will go.
Now, you mentioned how interestingly the Ninth Parliament started or began. We saw the scuffle that ensued during the vetting process. We're told that the report is ready and we could potentially be seeing some stiff sanctions. Weigh in on that for me very quickly. How important is it for the people of Ghana to see that report and also to see that some sanctions will be applied?
It is in the best interest of Parliament itself, to ensure that they don't treat some of these investigations like they treated these instances during the 8th Parliament. Because you recall that during the 8th Parliament, investigations like the ones conducted on absentee MPs, issues around MPs that caused a lot of disturbances during the e-levy passage, budget approval and all of that, went unpunished, went not completely dealt with. And we are seeing shadows of those past now in the 9th Parliament. And so the 9th Parliament must stand on a bright footing, one that, points strictly to the fact that these things will not be entertained. And that's why I am particularly disappointed that the House had to go on recess without the committee's report taken, because the committee was given specific timelines to be able to deliver on this mandate. The timelines were very clear. The committee could not. They asked for extension, even for the extended timeline. They still do not have their report adopted. And this is one of those regular approaches by Parliament. Delay some of these things in the hope that the Ghanaian people will forget about it because we'll move to the next biggest issue and forget. And then I think that they should be lying to themselves this time around, because we cannot allow these things to fester if we expect that there will be some significant changes to the way Parliament does its things going forward.
Certainly. Well, it's one that we're keeping an eye out on, and I'm sure in due course we can have further conversations about that. But coming on to today's issue, now the Speaker of Ghana's Parliament has agreed to a request by the National Intelligence Bureau, NIB, to release 2 members of Parliament, Mustafa Yusuf as well as Kwame Asario, being A+ for investigations. Now, whilst we don't know what specific reasons have been put forth, we juxtaposing what the letter says against some recent happenings and some utterances from some of these members of Parliament, as well as some alleged conduct, to infer that that might be the reason. If we start off with Kwame Asario, or being A+, we know in recent times he had threatened to expose the identity of ex-government officials, or an ex-government official allegedly involved in Ahmed Swale's murder. And also recently he talked about an interception of a truck carrying suspected missing cables belonging to ECG in his constituency. What do you make of these 2 issues?
Well, I cannot speak to the issues because, just like you said, these could simply be... I cannot speak to them because we are not clear if these are the reasons why the NIB has invited him.
That's right.
And I'm sure that for Mr. Yusuf, there may be also other issues that we may be speculating.
That's right.
What I can speak to is the issue about the processes. So, for example, we've seen a letter from Parliament that is specifically indicating Mr. Speaker clearance, so to speak, to the NIB to interview these members of Parliament in Parliament. And this letter, if you look at it carefully, the heading of the letter is a reply to perhaps or certainly an earlier letter from the NIB ostensibly requesting Mr. Speaker's clearance for this to happen. And if you ask me, I say that that's not new. In fact, if you recall, sometime in 2018 and then before, the state of how members of Parliament get arrested, how their homes get ransacked, became a topical matter. Of course, there's always been an issue in our country,
That's
as
right.
against the constitutional provisions that provided some form of immunity and protection for members of parliament, despite the fact that they are not above the law. And this led to 2018 when Speaker Okwe, perhaps in trying to help sanitize the system, so to speak, came to some understanding with security agencies that, look, we cannot say that you should never invite members of parliament or arrest them or investigate them or interview them, on any issue of criminality or what have you. However, it must be done in a particular way, just so that the parliamentary immunity process can be respected. And so it was during that period of Speaker Okwe that this issue of if security agencies want to invite members of parliament, they specifically write to the speaker and say, I need member of parliament X, and then speaker will say, yes, this period the member will not be doing parliamentary business, and so, or the member will be doing parliamentary business, but come to the speaker's conference room with your security people and come interview him or her. The member of parliament will have their lawyers in there, blah, 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 blah. And so we saw how someone like Mr. Kennedy Japon was interviewed sometime in 2018 or 2019, I think, inside Parliament as part of an investigation that was ongoing at the time. We've seen other examples that have actually happened. And so I think this is quite constant. And of course, in Speaker Bagbin's first term as Speaker, a number of these instances also happened. And so this is quite consistent with the modus that had been adopted really, or agreed between Parliament and the security agencies, that once it borders on a member of Parliament, once a member of Parliament is made about parliamentary business, just like the courts would want to get the certificate of Mr. Speaker to say that an MP is going about parliamentary business, just notify me as Speaker or whoever is the Speaker. And then, of course, we'll indicate to the member of Parliament to make himself or herself available to be interviewed, investigated, whatever, usually within the presence of Parliament. And then, of course, the law can take its course. I think since that situational arrangement happened, it's been a bit tidier than it used to be in the past.
Right.
And, continuous improvement certainly can be introduced where the system can be improved. But at least it creates an indication, notes that members of Parliament cannot think that they are above the law and nobody can touch them, cannot be investigated, and always running under the clothing that has been provided by the Constitution with regards to immunity. But at least there could be platforms, tidier platforms made available to the security agencies to speak to them and to investigate them for whatever things they have been alleged to have done.
And I mean, because you introduced the word tidy, what are the implications then if matters like this are not handled in a tidy manner?
Well, we saw how it went in the past. A member of Parliament is going to Parliament or is in his house preparing for Parliament, gets arrested, or sometimes it's not even parliamentary period at all, but once they get arrested, they complain that, it's during parliamentary season because my committee will have to sit. Because the Constitution says that you cannot arrest them while they are attending to Parliament, while they are in Parliament, or while they are returning from Parliament. So there were all manner of interpretations around how this particular constitutional provision should be exercised. But I think since this new arrangement was introduced, it's made it quite tidy. So hardly do we hear that there's been some Rambo-style arrest of a member of Parliament, or invitation of a member of Parliament. It goes through some form of due process. And so on that side, that is that. On the side of members of Parliament also, it gives them the indication that, look, Parliament will not shield you if you are supposed to be investigated for anything, except that they will provide the necessary platform so that the process will be tidy. But ultimately, you've got to go to court. If you've got to face the law, you will face the law, go to the courts, within the confines of the arrangement that has been reached. And for me, that tidiness was needed, really, because we certainly could not have gone down the route of allowing members of Parliament and other officials of Parliament to be taken through the process that sometimes our security agencies like to take people through deliberately, of Rambo style, of Friday afternoon arrest, so that you can be able to spend the entire weekend with them without having to go to the court and all of those things.
Right.
But I mean, when it comes to parliamentary practices and history, it stems from a particular place. These whole things around immunities. You don't want a situation where, for example, in a hung parliament like we had in the 8th Parliament, where the difference is just one, so that if there is a major vote that needs to be done, state security agencies, of course, we know how order from above is a very notable phrase.
That's
in our
right.
country. State agencies can receive order from above, arrest 5 MPs from the other side, and probably detain them for a couple of hours in the name of not wanting them to go to Parliament and go and vote, just so that a particular side can win a vote. Those were the historical antecedents, even in the past, many, many years, centuries ago, that informed how parliamentary privileges and immunities came about, so that governments of the day do not get to abuse it and arbitrarily, deprive members of parliament, who are the representatives of the people, from making themselves available to perform parliamentary business. And I'm happy that at least there's a tidier way. It's not foolproof. It's
right.
not completely without challenges, but it's a good start.
So would you then say, in summing it up, that this provides a balance between accountability as well as the need to protect MPs from political harassment? Are the scales fairly tipped?
I mean, you've summed it up succinctly. I mean, that's the fine balance that this process is seeking to achieve. And for me, it's a balance that certainly must be achieved. If you're a member of parliament, yes, you have some privileges. Yes, you are at a particular level. That does not make you above the law. And so we must find that fine balance, so that the things that I will do as a regular citizen and not go scot-free for, you should not go scot-free for it simply because you're a member of parliament.
Right.
Except that, yes, we can understand that, sometimes some of the processes will change, but ultimately the results should be the same. In that, if I, as an individual citizen, commit a crime, and this will be what it will eventually lead to for me to be punished, then you must also be punished if you're a member of parliament, even if it is through a particular process that makes it a tidier, because of the status that they hold.
Now, the letter from the NIB, it was silent on the reasons for the request for these particular MPs to avail themselves to some questioning. How does that sit with you? Would you have liked to have seen some reasons put forth, or do you think that for the reasons of security, it should remain silent?
To be fair, I have not seen previous letters that the security agencies have written to Mr. Speaker or the Clerk of Parliament around matters like this. I'm sure that the individuals involved would have received invitations which had specifically indicated, or which will specifically indicate why they are being invited, so that together with their lawyers, they can prepare. But once the security agencies are writing to Parliament, just out of courtesy to release, so to speak, quote unquote, release these members of Parliament for questioning, I really do not think that they must bother themselves too much about providing Parliament the reasons why they are inviting people, or provided that these individuals themselves know why they have been invited. So for Parliament, it's out of courtesy. You have 2 of your members. We really need to speak to them. So please, based on our previous understanding, let's have the opportunity to speak to them. I don't think that they should necessarily go into the details of why they are speaking to them. But of course, in all fairness, for the individuals who are going to appear, I would be surprised if they have not been told why they
right.
want to be spoken to.
As a citizen, do you want to know?
Well, certainly. I mean, there are tens of thousands of citizens in the constituencies of 2 MPs. These 2 members of Parliament, just like any other member of Parliament, are in the public eye. One has served, I think, if I'm not mistaken, as National Service Board before, Minister before, Youth and Sports. One, just entered Parliament. There's a lot of following. And so certainly, and I'm sure that the security agencies will not be hiding some of these information from us, because some of these investigations, we see notices up there on their through releases, that they put up explaining these things to us. So we certainly would want to know why these members of Parliament are being invited, and also want to follow the trail, so far as these cases are concerned, to see that they are being taken to their logical conclusion. It helps when citizens know that even if you're a member of Parliament, if there is a need for you to be investigated on X, Y, and Z reasons, you will be investigated. We'll be told how the investigations are going. We'll see how the investigations are going. In the end, if you get exonerated, we will know. In the end, if you get if you are found culpable, we will also know, and we will see through the entire process transparently.
Certainly. Now, you say that the processes are tidier. If you could maybe add or subtract anything to the process to make it its tidiest forms, would you prefer some kind of reform in Ghana's parliamentary immunity laws?
Well, I think that as we grow and develop our democracy, our rule of law regime, as we fine-tune our constitution, there needs to be better clarity, to some of these issues. Because in the absence of clarity, these things can be abused. You recall that even though there is an understanding between the executive and the judiciary and the legislature on how service of court processes should be made on members of parliament, when it should be made, how it should be made on parliament itself, when it should be made, we still have some challenges here and there, whether to submit on a Monday or any other day, how it plays out, the recent cases and situations we've had. So, you recall the Afenyomakin case, against the Speaker's declaration of some of the seats that haven't been vacated and all of those court processes and how the services in court are. It does not help if we still have ambiguity around these matters. And so better interpretation from the courts on these matters as are provided for in the Constitution will be necessary. I'm not too sure if the security agencies feel any disadvantaged that if they have to interview members of parliament, they have to come and do it in parliament in a conference provided for them. Would they have preferred in their own security institutions? What would have been the difference from interviewing somebody in the Speaker's conference room as against interviewing somebody in an NIB facility? How does that compromise the investigation processes, or how does that add on to the investigation process? I think these are edges that need to be, fine-tuned, so that we can have we can be the better for it as a country. But as it stands now, it's a growing democracy. These things will happen. While they happen, we'll make them better. We'll evolve. Over 3 decades after our constitution had been promulgated, we see how every now and then, we get to improve them, and we hope that these improvements continue, so that our country can be seen as a solid democracy going forward.
Certainly. And Sami, my final question. On Monday, what are you expecting to see? What sort of follow-ups do you think the good people of Ghana should be made privy to?
Well, if the history is anything to go by, we've seen, like I said, there's been many of such interviews. Maybe in the past, the letters between the correspondence between Parliament and the investigative bodies, which sometimes included the police, and all of that, had not been this public. And that's why we probably have not spoken too much about it. But there's been many of these, investigations, many of these interrogations happening in Parliament. I think that it should not be shrouded in secrecy. It is in the interest of both parliaments, the parliamentarians, and the investigative agencies to be able to carry the people of Ghana along, especially as it involves people's representatives, so that people in their respective constituencies will not be sitting on the edge, not knowing what's happening with their members of parliament, especially with the kind of history that we have as a country as involving these things. So on Monday, I expect a smooth process as the previous processes have been, but beyond the processes, I expect that there will be some communication.
Absolutely. Sami, thank you so much for lending us your time this morning and for expanding this conversation for us.
Pleasure always.
Have a great weekend. Again, that was Sami Obing, Executive Director, Parliamentary Network Africa, weighing in on the issue of that NIB invite. And that invite has gone out to 2 members of Parliament. You've got Kwame Asare Obing, popularly known as A+, as well as Mustafa Yusuf. But this is still the best breakfast show in all of the land. This is still 3 FM Sunrise on 3FM 92.7.
3FM 92.7. Urban Lifestyle Radio Station. Yanara Sassini
Hey, I bought in my